The courtroom held its breath the moment she walked in, the billionaire's daughter gliding forward with the practiced confidence of someone who had never faced a real consequence in her life. But today, the spotlight didn't belong to her. It shifted to the quiet, aging veteran she had assaulted. A man gripping his cane with the steady resilience of someone who had survived battles far harsher than this one. Cameras snapped. Murmurs rose. Judge Caprio lifted his gaze and the room fell silent. Then he asked a single question, soft, precise, devastating. The billionaire's daughter's smile faded. The veteran's eyes lowered, and every person watching inside the courtroom and across live streams felt the tension tighten like a wire. Before the judge spoke again, he looked at the cameras and said, almost gently, "Tell me where you're watching from. And if you're a Caprio fan, hit subscribe, because what came next stunned the nation." Outside the courthouse, the air felt charged, like the country itself was holding a collective breath. News vans lined the sidewalk, reporters shouting updates into microphones as crowds gathered behind barricades, waving signs that read "Justice for Veterans" and "No one is above the law." Inside, the tension was just as electric. People had shown up hours early, hoping to witness what many were already calling the moment America confronts its conscience. Because this wasn't just about an assault. This was about the uncomfortable divide between those who serve and those who believe their wealth exempts them from accountability. The veteran represented something deeper: sacrifice, humility, the quiet pride of immigrants and working families who built their lives from the ground up. And the billionaire's daughter represented the opposite: an inherited arrogance sharpened by privilege, a belief that apologies were optional and respect was negotiable. Social media was already on fire long before the hearing began. Hashtags surged across timelines, influencers weighed in, and veterans groups urged their members to tune in. A clip of the daughter rolling her eyes during her earlier police interview had gone viral, fueling outrage that spread like wildfire. And then came the ripple no one expected. Messages pouring in from immigrants, soldiers, teachers, single parents, people saying they felt this case in their bones. This wasn't just a legal dispute. It had become a mirror reflecting everything Americans feared and hoped about justice. But what most of them didn't know was that a hidden detail in the case file was about to explode into the open. And once it did, nothing in that courtroom would stay the same. She grew up in a world where the walls were made of glass and the floors were made of gold. Transparent enough for everyone to see her, but cushioned enough that she never felt the impact of a single fall. From the moment she could walk, doors opened before her, not because she earned it, but because of the billion-dollar empire her father controlled. Every headline she ever made was softened, every mistake dissolved by PR teams that specialized in erasing consequences. She didn't just inherit wealth, she inherited invincibility, or at least she believed she did. In school, teachers learned quickly that she wasn't a student, she was staff. A raised eyebrow from her, a whispered threat of, "I'll make one call," and entire policies shifted in her favor. Her classmates either envied her or feared her, and she learned how to weaponize both reactions. When she was 18, she crashed her first luxury car. Instead of facing discipline, she posed for a magazine spread 2 weeks later, smiling next to a brand new model her father bought her as a replacement. The message was clear. Consequences were for other people. As she grew older, her behavior sharpened, fueled by a cocktail of entitlement and curated online adoration. She flaunted designer outfits on social media while mocking anyone who wore anything off the rack. She publicly berated service workers, rolled her eyes at police officers, and treated charity events like opportunities for glamorous selfies rather than acts of compassion. Whenever anyone pushed back, she delivered the same cold threat. "Do you know who my father is?" And the truth was, people did know. People stepped aside until the night of the incident. The veteran had simply been in her way. walking too slowly, blocking the path to her VIP parking spot. Witnesses said she tapped her horn, then shouted at him to move faster and, startled, trying to steady himself on his cane. The moment he didn't obey instantly, something snapped in her. It wasn't rage born of pain or fear. It was rage born of entitlement. She shoved him. Hard. The kind of shove that comes from someone who never once imagined she would have to answer for it. When he fell, her first reaction wasn't concern. It was annoyance. She told bystanders to relax, dismissed his injury as overdramatic, and stormed off without a second glance. Her family's lawyers immediately went to work. They attempted to pay off witnesses, suppress footage, and spin the story into something softer. They insisted she was frightened and defending herself, even though the video showed nothing but cruelty. For a moment, it seemed like the familiar pattern would repeat. Her actions would be sanitized, the veteran forgotten, and life would continue as if nothing had happened. But this time, the country saw the truth. And this time, the case landed not in the hands of a court owned by power, but under the steady, unshakable gaze of Judge Caprio. And as the evidence stacked up against her, she still believed her last name would protect her. She had no idea that the moment the judge opened that file, the world she had always taken for granted was about to crack wide open. Long before the cameras ever captured him struggling to stand in that courtroom, he had already lived a lifetime of battles most Americans would never see. He wasn't born into money. He wasn't born into comfort. He was born into a small immigrant family that believed in three things: work hard, stay humble, and give back to the country that gave you a chance. His mother washed dishes in a diner. His father fixed old cars in a garage so small the tools had to be hung on the walls to make space. And yet, despite the challenges, they laughed often, held each other tightly, and carried a sense of quiet gratitude you could feel from across the room. Growing up, he watched his parents take pride in every paycheck, every repaired tire, every night they went to bed exhausted, but thankful. He learned early that dignity doesn't come from what you own, it comes from how you live. So when he turned 18, he made a decision that startled even his father. He enlisted. "This country gave us a home," he told them, "so let me give something back." His mother cried, but she understood. Service was the language of their gratitude. His years in uniform shaped him into a man of remarkable calm and unshakable discipline. He trained hard, fought harder, and held on to his humanity, even in moments designed to break it. He carried his squad through storms, through heat, through nights where the only light came from the moon and the only warmth came from the brothers beside him. When he was injured in the line of duty, an injury that carved deep pain into his right leg and left him dependent on that cane he now held, he didn't complain. He smiled through recovery, whispered thanks when he could walk again, and told himself he was lucky to have come home when many others didn't. But returning to civilian life wasn't simple. The job market didn't roll out a red carpet. Bills stacked up faster than paychecks. His injury made movement slow, and people weren't always patient. Still, he never lost the softness in his voice or the gratitude in his eyes. He volunteered at community centers, helping young immigrants adjust, teaching them the pride he carried, not in being perfect, but in persevering. He never expected praise, never asked for exceptions. And when the incident with the billionaire's daughter happened, pressing charges wasn't on his mind. He wasn't angry at her wealth. He wasn't jealous of her status. If anything, he only felt a quiet sadness. Sadness that someone could be given so much and still learn so little about respect. Even when he hit the ground from her shove, the pain slicing through his old injury like a reopened wound, he didn't curse her. He didn't lash out. He simply gathered himself, wiped the dust from his pants, and tried to stand without alarming anyone. That humility, so effortless, so real, was what struck Judge Caprio the most when he read the case file. Because buried inside those documents was something the nation hadn't yet heard, something that explained why the veteran walked into that courtroom not with anger, but with dignity. And when that truth finally surfaced, it would shake the room to its core. The courtroom shifted from tense silence to sharp edges the moment the billionaire's attorney rose to speak. His voice carried the smug confidence of a man accustomed to bending narratives and bulldozing truth. He strode toward the center like a performer stepping into a spotlight, turning to the judge with a polished smile. "Your Honor," he began, "the evidence has been wildly exaggerated. My client was frightened. The veteran behaved unpredictably." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The veteran lowered his eyes, absorbing the blow with the same composure he carried into every storm of his life. The attorney pressed harder, twisting facts until they almost snapped. The daughter leaned back in her seat, arms crossed, whispering snide comments to her legal team. At one point, she even laughed, an icy, careless laugh that sliced through the courtroom and sent a wave of disgust through the observers. Phones discreetly lifted. People were recording. Judge Caprio watched quietly, chin resting on his hand, eyes unblinking. Every accusation, every distortion, every moment of arrogance soaked into the atmosphere like fuel building toward an inevitable fire. When the attorney attempted to paint the veteran as unstable, a low murmur surged from the benches behind him. Even the stenographer paused, startled by the brazenness. And then, just when it seemed the defense might bulldoze the moment, the judge straightened in his chair. His gaze landed on the attorney first, then on the daughter, then on the veteran whose dignity still anchored him in place. He leaned forward, and with that single movement, the entire room braced itself, knowing the turning point had arrived. Judge Caprio's voice, when it finally broke the tension, wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the stillness of a man who understood the weight of justice, the fragility of dignity, and the cost of letting lies stand unchallenged. The room fell silent as he folded his hands and looked directly at the defense attorney. "You say the veteran behaved unpredictably," he began, each syllable deliberate. "Tell me, which part of walking with a cane frightened your client?" The attorney's rehearsed confidence faltered. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out except a nervous swallow. The daughter shifted uneasily beside him, suddenly unsure whether this performance was unfolding in her favor. Caprio didn't wait. He turned to the veteran, his expression softening in that unmistakable way the world had come to admire. "Sir," he said gently, "I want you to tell this courtroom, in your own words, why you didn't pursue charges the moment this incident occurred." The veteran hesitated, eyes lowered. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled, not from fear, but from humility. "Your Honor, I didn't want to ruin a young woman's life. I figured she'd realize she made a mistake. That was enough for me." Gasps rippled through the benches. Even those watching through live streams felt the punch of his sincerity. He wasn't here for revenge. He wasn't here for compensation. He was here because someone forced him to be. Judge Caprio nodded slowly, as if confirming a truth he already knew. Then he lifted a document from the case file. "Let the record show," he said, "that the veteran's fall reopened a service-related injury, an injury that required medical attention, an injury he tried, very deliberately, to downplay to avoid escalating this case." The billionaire's daughter stiffened. The attorney raised an objection so frantic it collapsed under its own desperation. Caprio didn't even acknowledge it. He was looking directly at her now, the way a mirror looks at a person who can no longer run from their reflection. "You assaulted a man who sacrificed more for this country than you have ever been asked to give," he said, his voice steady, almost sorrowful. "And instead of remorse, we witnessed arrogance. Instead of an apology, we witnessed mockery. And instead of accountability, your team attempted to rewrite reality itself." Her lips parted, but the courtroom felt the shift, the unraveling of the entitlement she had carried like a shield her entire life. Suddenly, she wasn't a billionaire's daughter. She was just a frightened young woman who had run out of escapes. Caprio leaned back for a moment, letting the silence work the way only truth can. Cameras zoomed closer. People leaned forward. Even the security officers, usually stone-faced, looked moved. Then he delivered the line that would ignite the nation. "It is a tragedy," he said softly, "when someone who has everything learns nothing. And it is an honor when someone who has endured so much still stands with grace." The daughter's eyes filled, not with humility, at least not yet, but with the realization that this time, her name wasn't saving her. Caprio wasn't finished. He placed the file down, looked at both parties, and said, in a tone that sent chills through every listener, "My decision will reflect the values this courtroom stands for, and I assure you, the world will remember what happens next." The moment Judge Caprio finished speaking, the courtroom exhaled as if it had been holding its breath for far too long. But outside those walls, the reaction was anything but quiet. The clip of his takedown hit social media within minutes, first through shaky phone footage, then through polished news edits, then through millions of stitches, duets, and reaction videos. The hashtag #Caprio for Justice surged to the top of every platform before the daughter even left the courthouse steps. Comments flooded in from veterans, immigrants, students, parents, each one echoing the same sentiment. Finally, someone said what needed to be said. News anchors replayed the judge's line, "It is a tragedy when someone who has everything learns nothing." It became a rallying cry. Political commentators debated its impact. Late-night hosts quoted it with dramatic pauses. Even celebrities, usually cautious about legal controversies, posted messages praising the veterans' humility and the judge's integrity. One actor wrote, "If America had more leaders like Caprio, maybe justice wouldn't feel like a luxury." The post hit 5 million likes in hours. Meanwhile, the billionaire's daughter faced a backlash she had never imagined. Brands quietly distanced themselves. Influencers who once posed with her unfollowed her in waves. Old videos resurfaced. Clips of her mocking workers, bragging about her privilege, treating people like props. Each resurfaced moment flowed like fuel into the firestorm already burning around her. Her father's PR team scrambled, releasing a rushed apology that only made things worse. The public didn't want a press statement. They wanted accountability. But the true spotlight was on the veteran. Donations poured into his medical fund. Neighborhoods organized candlelight walks in his honor. Strangers sent messages calling him the embodiment of grace. And in every conversation, from cafes in New York to living rooms in California, the same question kept rising. How could someone with so little pride hold so much dignity, while someone with everything failed so completely? Yet, for all the praise, all the outrage, all the noise, one question remained unanswered. Because Judge Caprio had not yet revealed his final ruling. And when he finally stepped back into that courtroom, the world would be watching. When the dust finally settled, the courtroom that had moments earlier shaken with chaos now felt eerily calm. The veteran sat quietly, shoulders slightly lowered, not in defeat but in release. The billionaire's daughter stared straight ahead, her once unyielding confidence melted into a conflicted stillness. The judge, who had watched a battle of worlds unfold in front of him, finally spoke words that would echo far beyond the wooden walls of the chamber. "This," he said, pausing, as though to let the silence carry his message, "was never just a debate about principles. It was a reminder of what happens when we stop seeing each other as human." Those words landed like truth often does, soft but undeniable. The veteran nodded, because he understood. He had lived long enough to know that justice isn't just about winning, it's about being understood. The billionaire's daughter lowered her gaze, realizing perhaps for the first time that the world was not as small, controlled, or purchasable as she once believed. Her father's billions could build empires, but they couldn't buy wisdom. When the session ended, People walked out with something heavier than opinions. They carried reflection. The journalist who broke the story stepped outside and typed the headline that would reshape public conversation. In a world divided by power, a veteran proved that the loudest voice is the one grounded in truth. The moral was simple yet profound. Respect is not earned by wealth, status, or influence. It's earned by listening, truly listening to the stories of others. As the screen fades from the final courtroom image, the narrator's voice returns, steady, reflective, and unmistakably charged with purpose. So, what did we really witness today? The voice asks as slow-motion clips replay the veteran's final stand. The billionaire's daughter's stunned silence, and the crowd erupting outside the courthouse. A battle of words, a clash of power, or a moment that reminded us all that integrity still has a place in this world. The music rises softly, hopeful yet serious. The narrator continues, if this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you believe that truth still matters, then don't let it end here. A montage flashes. People watching on their phones, living rooms, cafes, classrooms, audiences everywhere, absorbing the shockwaves of this showdown. Tell me, the narrator says with a grin, where are you watching from? I read every comment. A beat. And if you're a fan of narratives that hit deeper than headlines, stories of courage, justice, and the human spirit, then hit that subscribe button, because this is just the beginning.